Hey guys, we have another difficult problem solving question. However, I feel like this one has more obvious steps, but the problem is it gets really hectic because the equations that we're going to make are very long, to put simply. So this is also going to be a bit about laying your work out properly. Again, I have had very intelligent students, very capable students who can solve pretty much anything, but because their working out is laid out messily, they make small mistakes. And that's what I'm going to go through here, is exactly how I would personally lay this out and how we can, compare these two things. Because I wouldn't write this all on one line, because you're going to see that this is actually a pretty hefty equation. So we have two shapes here. We have this part of a sector. It's not really a full sector. And we have a circle. And they're telling us that the area of shape A and B are the same. So as you can imagine, working out the area of shape A, and I like to write out in words first. So if I have area of shape A, we're going to have the area of a sector minus the area of the small sector, right? So area big sector minus small sector. And as you can imagine, that might be a somewhat large equation. And for B, we're going to just have the area of the circle. And those two things should be identical. So that's the first thing I like to do, just so I can kind of focus myself a little bit. Then I ask myself, how do I work out the area of a sector? Now, I personally don't like memorizing stuff. So instead I think to myself, well, what is a sector? A sector is just a fraction of a big circle. So if I have the area of a sector, it means I've got a fraction of a big circle. Now, where does that fraction come from? It comes from the angle that the sector subtends. So how wide the sector is. So for example, if it's 180 degrees, it's actually a semicircle, it's half a circle. If it's 90 degrees, it's a quarter of a circle, and so on. So all you're going to do is say what fraction of the circle this is. So in this case, it's 45 degrees out of 360, and then you can simplify that a bit later. This is a non-calculated question, by the way. And if you want the area of the big sector, well, that's going to be pi, and then times the radius squared. Now the radius is actually going to be these two things added together. Because don't forget, we're talking about the big sector, the overall pizza slice here. So we have 3x minus 1 plus 2x, that'd be 5x minus 1 squared. And then take away the same angle, so 45 over 360, pi, and in this case the radius is just my 3x minus 1 squared. And that should be equal to the area of the circle, which is pi r squared. But remember, they've given us the diameter, so I'm going to half this. I get 1 minus x squared. From here, there's a ton of different things you can actually do. This here is actually the difference of two squares, if you wanted to kind of factorize it. But in my opinion, the easiest thing to do is, first of all, divide through by pi. And then we're going to simplify 45 over 360. If you half 360 a few times, you will get to 45, or you can just kind of work it out normally, however you want to do it. So we could divide top and bottom by 5, for instance, in order to get 9 over 72, and then of course we can divide it by 9 right afterwards. So we get basically an eighth. So what we have here is we have an eighth of 5x minus 1 squared minus, again, an eighth of 3x minus 1 squared equals 1 minus x squared. I might want to rewrite that as minus x plus 1 squared, just because I'm going to expand brackets soon. But before I expand brackets, and again, this is something I see some students do, is they expand it even with a fraction in front. The problem there is, again, dealing with fractions is quite tricky. If you have like 5/8 minus 1 plus 2/3, it's going to get really tricky. So instead, I would times both sides by 8, because I personally hate fractions. So 5x minus 1 squared minus 3x minus 1 squared. Again, that is the difference of two squares. I don't think factorizing it would make it much easier, so I'm not going to bother. Expanding the left side, we get 25x squared, because it's 5x times 5x. Then we get 5x times minus 1, so minus 5x, and we have that twice, that'd be minus 10x. Then we have plus 1. The next mistake I see is when you expand a bracket that has a minus in front. A lot of people would write minus 9x squared and then write the rest of it. Personally, I write it still with a bracket because I want to make sure that I don't make any mistakes. Again, this is all about laying your work out neatly and following through very, very carefully. Because if I make a mistake on any of these numbers, I get the wrong answer. So again, we have 9x squared, because it's 3x times 3x. Then we have minus 3x minus another 3x for the two cross terms, and then plus 1. And again, now if you look here, the signs all change because of the negative. Over here, I'm going to do the exact same thing. So we have minus x times minus x, which of course is x squared. Then we're going to have 1 times minus x twice, so that's going to be minus 2x. And then we're going to have plus 1. So now what we're going to do is do 25x squared minus 9x squared, which gives me 16x squared. Then we have minus 10x minus 6x, so that's minus 4x. Then we have 1 minus 1, which is nothing. Then on the other side we have 8 times x squared, so we have 8x squared. 8 times minus 2x is minus 16x. 8 times 1 is 8. Then I'm going to move everything over to the left-hand side. Yeah, I think the left-hand side would make sense. So minus 8x squared from both sides gives me 8x squared. Then I want to add 16x to both sides. So that gives me plus 12x. Then minus 8 from both sides, 0. I'm going to divide everything by 4 to make my equation as simple as humanly possible. 0. And then obviously we're just factorizing for the value of x. So we're looking for two numbers. Where should I do this? I might do this off to the side here. So we're looking for two numbers that times to AC, so that'd be times to minus 4. And then need to add to 3, so that'd be minus 4 and 1. So that means we have 2x squared minus 4x plus x minus 2 equals 0. So factorize, again, split it down the middle. Factorize the first two, 2x, x minus 2. Then we have just plus 1. So our two brackets are 2x plus 1 and x minus 2 equals 0. So of course we get two answers. We get x is minus a half and x is 2. But if you notice in the question it does say work out the value singular of x. Well, if I have a look at this, what does x represent? X represents a length, for example 2x as an example. Well, 2 times minus a half is minus 1. Does that make any sense? Can I have a length of minus 1? No. So we're actually taking the positive value, because if I sub that into all of the different values of x, it works. Okay, it makes sense. So x must be equal to 2. There we go. So again, if you take it very carefully and you lay your work out relatively neatly like I've done, it will make a lot more sense. Leaving the negative sign outside the bracket, again, this is a really common mistake even grade 8 and 9 students make. Okay, you have to lay your work out in such a way that it requires the least amount of brain power to read, because that helps you avoid mistakes in the future. The only thing I probably would say is I probably would have written 45 over 360 off to the side and simplified it just to be super sure that I got it right. But other than that, it should be all okay. So again, hope you found that useful. Again, think of the exam technique more than the actual maths. I'm sure the maths isn't too bad.